Have you ever felt it? That sudden, inexplicable urge that grips your chest in the dead of night? At exactly 3 a.m. on November 13th, 2022, 24-year-old Hunter Johnson bolted upright in his girlfriend's off-campus apartment in Moscow, Idaho. Something was wrong. He couldn't name it, couldn't explain it, but his soul was screaming. "That's something I've never done in my life there," Johnson would later recall. "There was no noise, I don't know why, but something in my soul told me that I should go lock my door." So he did. Click. The deadbolt slid home. What Hunter didn't know, what he couldn't possibly know, was that just 200 yards down the street, 4 of his closest friends were living their final moments. While he secured his sanctuary, theirs was being violated. Between 4 and 4:20 a.m., a figure dressed in black slipped through the sliding door at 1122 King Road. Not frantic, not desperate, methodical, prepared. Armed with a fixed-blade combat knife, he moved through that house like death itself, silent, deliberate, unstoppable. Madison Mogen, 21, Kaylee Goncalves, 21, Xana Kernodle, 20, Ethan Chapin, 20. 4 lives, 1 knife, 20 minutes that shattered a college town forever. But here's what will haunt you. Hunter's inexplicable urge to lock his door saved his life and his girlfriend Emily's life that night. The same primal instinct that kept them breathing failed to wake Madison, Kaylee, Xana, and Ethan just steps away. Why does intuition choose who to save? Why does death knock on one door and pass by another? This is the story of 4 friends who never got the warning, and the 2 who did. Welcome to the night that changed everything. Madison Mogen, 21, Kaylee Goncalves, 21, Xana Kernodle, 20, Ethan Chapin, 20. 4 names that should have been on graduation programs, not police reports. Madison and Kaylee were best friends, inseparable since childhood. The kind of friendship that survives distance, drama, and everything college throws at you. They'd planned to move to Austin together after graduation, had already started apartment hunting, dreaming of their post-college lives. Xana Kernodle was the type who lit up every room she entered. Studying marketing, working part-time, building a life with her boyfriend Ethan. She was scrolling through TikTok at 4:12 a.m. that night. Ethan Chapin wasn't even supposed to be there that night. He was visiting from his fraternity house, spending time with Xana. 20 years old, a triplet, studying recreation and tourism. His siblings would later say he was the protector of the 3. They lived in a rental house at 1122 King Road, a typical college setup, the kind of place where doors stayed unlocked and friends came and went freely. But that openness, that trust, that college town safety net, it became their vulnerability. The house had 6 bedrooms, but only 4 were occupied that night. 2 roommates, Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funke, survived. They'd live with that survivor's guilt forever. Moscow, Idaho isn't the kind of place where you expect quadruple homicides. Population 25,000, home to the University of Idaho, where the biggest concerns are usually noise complaints and underage drinking. These 4 students thought they were untouchable, invincible in the way only 20-somethings can feel. They had no idea someone was already watching, already planning. While Madison, Kaylee, Xana, and Ethan were living their college lives, Bryan Kohberger was studying theirs. 28 years old, PhD candidate in criminology at Washington State University, just 10 miles from the University of Idaho campus. He wasn't just learning about criminal behavior. According to investigators, he was preparing to become the subject of his own case study. Kohberger had created surveys about criminal thinking, specifically asking people about their thoughts during crimes. How did you leave the location? What did you do to avoid detection? Questions that seemed academic until you realize he might have been researching his own future actions. His classmates described him as odd, intense, obsessed with criminal cases to an uncomfortable degree. He'd allegedly stalk female students online, commenting on their photos, trying to engage them in conversations about criminal justice. Kohberger visited the area around 1102 King Road at least 12 times before the murders. His phone data shows him circling the house, learning the layout, the patterns, the vulnerabilities. This wasn't a random attack. This was reconnaissance. He knew the house. He knew the routines. He knew exactly when to strike for maximum impact, and minimum witnesses. The killer was literally studying how to kill while his future victims were just trying to pass their classes. The hunter was watching the hunted, and they had no idea they were prey. Saturday night, November 12th, 2022. For Madison and Kaylee, it started like any other weekend. Dinner at the corner club, drinks with friends, living their college lives. They were at a local sports bar, posting photos, tagging friends. Normal 21-year-old behavior, documenting their night for social media. But somewhere in Moscow, someone might have been watching those posts, tracking their location, their timeline. The girls got home around 1:45 a.m., ordering from a local food truck. The Grub Truck, captured on surveillance video. They're laughing, slightly intoxicated, completely unaware they have less than 3 hours to live. Meanwhile, Xana and Ethan were having their own quiet night. She'd ordered DoorDash at 4 a.m., her final transaction, delivered to a house that would become a crime scene within minutes. But here's where the story takes an eerie turn. At 3 a.m., Hunter Johnson, boyfriend of Emily Allen, friends with all 4 victims, suddenly felt compelled to lock the door at Emily's apartment just down the street. "That's something I've never done in my life there," Johnson later told investigators. "There was no noise, I don't know why, but something in my soul told me that I should go lock my door." At 3 a.m., Hunter was locking his door. At 4 a.m., Xana was getting food delivered. By 4:20 a.m., all 4 students were dead. Between 4 a.m. and 4:20 a.m., someone entered that house through the sliding door, climbed the stairs, and systematically murdered 4 people with what authorities describe as a large fixed-blade knife, likely a K-bar combat knife. Dylan Mortensen, one of the surviving roommates, heard noises. She saw a figure in black clothing and a mask walking toward the sliding door, but she didn't call 911. She was frozen, traumatized, trying to process what she'd seen. The killer left DNA on a knife sheath found under Madison's body. One piece of evidence that would ultimately unravel everything. 20 minutes, 4 lives, one mistake that would lead investigators straight to Bryan Kohberger. Sunday, November 13th, 2022. Around noon, the house at 1122 King Road should have been full of hungover college students, nursing headaches and planning their day. Instead, it was silent. Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funke woke up to a house that felt wrong. No sounds from upstairs, no responses to texts or calls. Something was off. They called Hunter Johnson and Emily Allen, asking them to come check on their friends. Hunter arrived first, walking into what he'd later describe as the moment his innocence died. He found Xana and Ethan in her second-floor bedroom. The scene was so horrific that he initially couldn't process what he was seeing. "I was like, what is going on? Is this real?" Johnson later told investigators. "Then you realize the gravity of what you just walked into." The 911 call came at 11:58 a.m., nearly 8 hours after the murders occurred. "Unconscious person" was the initial report, but responders quickly realized they were dealing with something far worse. 4 victims, multiple stab wounds each, blood throughout the second and third floors. The attack was vicious and personal, designed to ensure no one survived. But here's what investigators noticed immediately. No signs of forced entry, no evidence of robbery, no indication of a struggle in the main areas of the house. Whoever did this had access. They knew the layout. They moved efficiently through the house, targeting specific rooms, specific people. This wasn't random violence. This was execution. The surviving roommates were initially considered suspects, until investigators realized the timeline didn't work. The killer had been in and out within 20 minutes, leaving behind a house of horrors and one crucial piece of evidence. The Moscow Police Department had never handled a quadruple homicide. They called in the Idaho State Police, the FBI, anyone who could help make sense of the carnage. The breakthrough came from that knife sheath found under Madison's body. DNA analysis revealed a profile that didn't match any of the victims or the survivors, but it also didn't match anyone in the criminal database. Then came the digital detective work. Investigators analyzed cell phone data from towers around the area, looking for phones that had been in the vicinity during the time of the murders. They found Bryan Kohberger's phone. Not only had his phone been near the house during the murders, but location data showed he'd been in the area 12 previous times between June and November 2022. always late at night, always driving past 1122 King Road. Surveillance footage from businesses in the area captured a white Hyundai Elantra driving through Moscow multiple times that night. Kohberger owned a white Hyundai Elantra. His car was also captured on surveillance cameras in Pullman, Washington, his college town, around 5:30 a.m. on November 13th. The timeline fit perfectly for someone who had just committed murders in Moscow and was returning home. But the final piece of evidence came from an unexpected source: his parents' trash. The Pennsylvania State Police had been conducting surveillance on Kohberger after he'd driven cross-country for Christmas break. They recovered trash from his family's home and found items with his DNA that matched the profile from the knife sheath. Investigators had built an airtight case without Kohberger even knowing he was a suspect. Academic intelligence doesn't always translate to criminal cunning. By December 19th, authorities had identified him as their primary suspect. By December 30th, he was under arrest at his parents' home in Pennsylvania. The criminology student had become the subject of his own case study. Bryan Kohberger's trial was set to begin in August 2024, nearly 2 years after the murders. Families had prepared for months of testimony, evidence, and reliving their worst nightmare in a public courtroom. Then, on June 30th, 2025, everything changed. Kohberger accepted a plea deal: 4 charges of first-degree murder, 1 count of burglary, 4 consecutive life sentences, plus 10 years for the burglary charge. No possibility of parole, no appeals. The death penalty was taken off the table, but so was any chance of Kohberger ever being free again. He'll die in prison, just like his victims died in their beds. The families had mixed reactions. Some wanted the death penalty, wanted him to face the ultimate consequence for taking 4 young lives. Others were relieved to avoid a lengthy trial, to not have to hear the gruesome details repeated in court, to not risk an acquittal on a technicality. Kaylee Goncalves' family said they just wanted justice, and life without parole was justice. Madison Mogen's parents said they could finally begin to heal. Xana Kernodle's family emphasized that no sentence could bring her back, but at least he couldn't hurt anyone else. Ethan Chapin's parents, Steve and Stacy, said they were grateful the legal process was over, that they could focus on honoring their son's memory instead of waiting for court dates. The judge accepted the plea deal, noting the overwhelming evidence against Kohberger and the certainty of conviction if the case had gone to trial. But was justice truly served? 4 young lives for 1 life sentence. Does that equation ever balance? In a world where our entire lives are documented online, where we share our locations, our activities, our vulnerabilities, the Idaho 4 case serves as a terrifying reminder that someone might always be watching. Bryan Kohberger used social media, location data, and digital surveillance to study his victims before he killed them. He turned their openness, their trust, their normal college behavior into a weapon against them. Madison, Kaylee, Xana, and Ethan were just living their lives, posting photos, ordering food, hanging out with friends, normal activities that became part of a killer's research. Hunter Johnson and Emily Allant carry the trauma of discovery, the weight of being the ones who found their friends. Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funke survive with the knowledge that they were spared by geography, wrong room, right night. The families carry the burden of loss that never lessens. How do we live freely when someone might be watching, waiting, planning? The Idaho 4 case isn't just about 1 killer and 4 victims. It's about the vulnerability of modern life, the thin line between safety and danger. Because in the digital age, the most dangerous weapon isn't always a knife. Sometimes it's information. The Idaho 4 will be remembered not as victims, but as young people whose lives mattered, whose dreams were real, whose loss reminds us to cherish every ordinary moment, because we never know when ordinary becomes impossible.